There are places where the dark never sleeps, where shadows whisper and the unknown watches from just beyond the veil. Supernatural horrors, unsolved mysteries, and things that should not exist. Once you hear these stories, they may never leave you. The wolf beneath the skin. In the quiet village of Alder Hollow, the woods were spoken of only in whispers, half-forgotten warnings carried from grandmother to grandchild, murmured at hearths over sputtering candles. By day, the forest seemed almost benign, with sunlight filtering through ancient boughs, casting dappled gold on moss-slick stones. Children, barefoot and laughing, gathered berries at the tangled edge, their baskets brimming with sweetness and innocence. But as the sun slipped below the hills, a change came like the toll of a silent bell. Shutters creaked closed, doors barred with trembling hands, lanterns dimmed to feeble embers, and prayers, soft, desperate prayers, trembled from pale lips, each word a fragile shield against what prowled beneath the cold gleam of silver moons. "They say the forest remembers," old Marnie would whisper at the tavern, eyes clouded with dread. "And it never forgives." Gareth Whitlock had always laughed at such tales. He was a man of iron and fire, of sweat and calloused palms. The clang of his hammer on the anvil was the only song he trusted, the hiss of molten metal the only whisper he heeded. Stories of shadows and curses were for the old and frightened, not for him. But on the night of his 31st birthday, the forest decided it was time for Gareth to listen. He had left the tavern late, the laughter of his oldest friends still echoing in his ears. Warm mead lingered on his tongue, and the cobblestones beneath his boots felt reassuringly solid. Above, a pale sliver of moon rode the dark like a blade's edge. He hummed to himself, an old forge song, and didn't notice the wind at first. It came sudden and sharp, cutting through the merriment in his mind, carrying a scent that should not have existed. Damp earth stirred by claw, the copper tang of fresh blood, and beneath it all, something far older. Something that smelled of rot and ancient bones buried too long. The forest stirred, but not with the rustle of leaves. The sound was more intimate than that, more deliberate, like breath against the nape of the neck. Gareth stopped. The road before him lay dark and empty, save for the creeping mist pooling in hollows between the stones. He turned his head slowly, every muscle in his neck tight as drawn wire. "Who's there?" he called out, his voice rough, forced steady. The night swallowed his words. Something, no, many somethings, shifted just beyond the tree line. The whispering grew louder. Not words, not quite. More like the rustle of silk dragged over bone. His heart began to hammer, and he told himself it was foolishness. Just the drink, just the stories. Then came the growl, low, deep, not from a single throat, but from the earth itself, curling around his boots like smoke. The ground trembled, and Gareth took an involuntary step back. From the darkness between the twisted oaks, two eyes blinked open. They glowed, not with the reflection of moonlight, but with their own malevolent fire. A flicker of red and gold, like embers burning low, hungry and patient. Then another pair, and another. Eyes upon eyes, watching. A voice, thin as spider silk, spoke from the shadows. "We remember, Gareth Whitlock." Golden and vast, the eyes gleamed between the twisted roots. Ancient, patient and knowing. They did not blink. They simply watched. His breath caught in his throat. The weight of their gaze was suffocating, heavier than chains, heavier than the iron he hammered each day. Gareth turned on instinct, muscles coiled with panic. He tried to run. His boots scraped on loose gravel. One step, two, and then the night broke open. It was upon him before he could scream. But the attack was not the frenzied tearing of a wild beast. No, it was deliberate, almost reverent. The creature, whatever it was, moved with a terrible grace. Its jaws clamped down on his shoulder, not to shred, but to mark. He felt the puncture, a searing pain that radiated outward like molten metal poured into flesh. Claws, sharp as daggers, traced across his chest with an eerie gentleness, barely breaking skin. A touch of ownership, not destruction. And then the breath. Hot, fetid breath against his neck, warm enough to raise goose flesh along his spine. There was no hunger in it, only possession, only purpose. A whisper seemed to slip between that exhale, though he could not be sure if it was real or madness. Ours now. Then darkness swallowed him whole. He woke in the dirt, cold and damp, as the first pale fingers of dawn crept across the horizon. Dew clung to his lashes. The birds were beginning to stir, cautious chirps that sounded like warnings. His shirt hung in ribbons around him, shredded and stained. Blood, his blood, was caked and cracking on his skin, but the wounds that should have bled him dry hadn't. Instead, they burned. Not the sharp, searing pain of injury, but a deep, insistent throb. Heat pulsed beneath his skin, a slow and steady drumbeat echoing in rhythm with his heart, yet deeper still. A cadence that vibrated through bone and marrow. Gareth staggered to his feet, breath ragged. The forest around him was silent, as though it too was holding its breath. He stumbled home, clutching at his chest, every step a fever dream. Days passed. The sun shone, the forge roared, but Gareth was not the same. At night, sleep evaded him. His dreams were thick with shadows and whispers, with golden eyes watching from the darkness. He would wake drenched in sweat, the phantom feel of breath against his neck. His senses twisted into something inhuman. He could hear things, impossible things. The soft scuttle of mice beneath the floorboards, the rasp of spider legs weaving silk in the rafters, the flutter of an owl's wings, distant yet perfectly clear. His nose betrayed him. Every scent became an overwhelming tapestry. The copper tang of iron filings, the sweetness of fermenting apples from orchards far beyond the village, the sweat of the stable boy brushing past his door, the musk of fear on passing strangers. But it was the hunger that terrified him most. It gnawed at the edges of his sanity, a slow, creeping ache. It was not for bread or meat or ale. This hunger curled low in his gut, ancient and savage. He would catch himself staring at passers-by for too long, noting the pulse at their necks, the warmth of their skin, the scent of life pumping just beneath the surface. He began locking his door at night, not to keep danger out, but to keep himself in. Yet even that, he feared, would not be enough. It came on the next full moon. The night had begun in uneasy silence. The wind had died. The crickets, so constant and comforting, fell quiet. Even the village dog seemed to cower, whimpering beneath porches. Gareth lay restless in his bed, sweat clinging to his brow, heart pounding like a war drum. And then it struck, sudden and merciless. A pain like no other seized him, ripping through his body with the force of a lightning bolt. He tried to cry out, but the sound died in his throat as his bones began to twist, grinding against one another with sickening cracks. His back arched violently, muscles knotting and tearing as they reshaped, stretching beyond what flesh should bear. Please, he gasped, voice ragged, but the words dissolved into strangled screams. His fingers clawed desperately at the sheets, but the nails blackened, thickened, curved into gleaming talons that tore through fabric and skin alike. His jaws stretched, bones snapping as his face elongated into a monstrous snout. Fur erupted from his skin, coarse and dark, tearing the last remnants of his humanity apart. And through it all, the fire, the agony, the horror, his eyes blazed gold. His screams became howls, wild, soul-shattering howls that echoed out across Alder Hollow, sending shudders down every spine, making shutters close tighter and prayers tremble more fervently. When the pain finally ended, when the night had run its course, he woke naked and shivering beneath the twisted oaks of the forest. The dawn was cold and grey. His skin was slick with sweat and blood, though none of the wounds were his own. His mouth tasted of iron and salt, warm and metallic. He spat onto the moss, but the taste clung to his tongue, bitter and heavy with shame. And he had no memory, only darkness, only the scent of fear. And so it began. Each month, the curse returned, relentless and cruel. The transformation came like a storm he could not outrun, ripping him from his bed, drowning him in savagery. Hours stolen, nights blacked out. The village began to whisper. First, it was livestock. Sheep and goats found mutilated, entrails steaming in the morning frost. Then a shepherd's loyal dog vanished without trace, its chain snapped clean, the ground marked with deep clawed prints. But it did not end there. One night, the miller's daughter, sweet Elizabeth, with hair like corn silk and laughter like bells, did not come home. Her mother's wails echoed through the village at dawn. Gareth heard the news and fell to his knees. His stomach twisted. He could still taste blood that was not his. He locked himself in his forge that very night, bolting the heavy oak doors, wrapping thick iron chains around his arms and legs, shackling himself to the anvil he had once shaped with pride. The fire in the hearth sputtered, casting shadows that danced like mocking spectres on the soot-stained walls. He prayed for mercy, for death. But the moon rose, and the wolf was stronger. The chains groaned, strained, and then snapped as though they were no more than spider silk. The metal bent, warped under inhuman strength, and the monster roamed once more. Through the darkened streets of Alder Hollow, beneath silver light and trembling stars, the beast walked, and somewhere, in the deepest corner of its mind, a shred of Gareth wept. He wanted to end it. There were nights he sat at the edge of his forge, staring into the flames, wondering if he could step inside and let the fire consume both man and beast. But each time, instinct recoiled, the wolf within snarling in defiance. So he tried the river. Under a crescent moon, he staggered to the water's edge, the weight of despair pressing him down like iron shackles. The black water swirled and whispered promises of oblivion. He waded in until the current tugged at his knees, then his waist, then his chest. He let himself fall forward, mouth filling with icy water, lungs burning, heart hammering with panic and hope. Hope that it would end. But it did not. The curse would not let him go. His body convulsed and thrashed against his will. Muscles he no longer controlled forced him to the surface, dragging him gasping to the shore. He coughed and sobbed into the mud, and the beast inside chuckled, low, mocking. You are mine. One night, when despair weighed heavier than the chains he once forged, Gareth found himself wandering deep into the woods. He didn't know how long he had walked, nor why his feet carried him there. but the forest seemed to open before him, guiding him along twisted paths beneath ancient oaks. The mist thickened, curling around his boots, and the wind whispered his name in voices not his own. And then he saw her. She stood beneath a gnarled yew tree, her form cloaked in robes the colour of storm clouds, embroidered with silver thread that shimmered like starlight. Her eyes, pale as moonstone, fixed on him with ancient patience. He froze. "You carry the mark," she whispered, her voice soft and hollow, like the rustling of dry leaves. Gareth's lip curled. He bared his teeth, more beast than man. "I carry the curse," he spat. His fist trembled, a curse that stains my hands with blood. She did not flinch. Instead, she stepped closer, her presence as calm and inevitable as the turning of seasons. Her hand rose, fingers thin and cool as frost, and gently touched his cheek. "No," she murmured. "A gift." He recoiled, snarling. "A gift? I butcher innocence. I wake with blood on my tongue and terror in my heart. What kind of gift is that?" "A gift misunderstood," she said softly, sadness flickering in her pale eyes. "You are the guardian." He shook his head violently. His voice broke. "A guardian does not slaughter children." Her gaze softened with sorrow, and her smile was tinged with ancient weariness. "You are untamed, but you are not evil." She pressed something cold and hard into his palm, a silver pendant, carved with runes he could not read. "When the time comes," she whispered, fading into mist, "remember who you are." Her words clung to him like a shadow as the seasons turned. And slowly, painfully, with failures and rage and tears, he learned. He learned to control it. Not through chains of iron, but through chains of will. On nights when the moon rose full and terrible, he no longer cowered or fought. He stood at the edge of the forest and chose. The beast howled within him, but he gave it purpose. He hunted, but not the innocent. He stalked the edges of the village for those who would do harm. Bandits lurking in the dark, wolves who preyed on livestock, and sometimes things far darker than he had ever imagined. Creatures older than the curse, drawn to the village by the same scent of fear that had once driven him mad. And when the dawn came, he would return, weary, trembling, but with clean hands. For the first time, he was both man and beast, and the village never knew. The villagers began to notice. At first they dared not speak of it, for fear of drawing the darkness back, but seasons turned, and the pattern became undeniable. The woods, once whispered of with dread and fear, grew calmer, safer. No more sheep vanished in the night. No more claw marks scarred barn doors. The shepherds slept easy beneath star-filled skies. Children who once dared not step beyond the tree line after dusk now wandered a little farther, giggling beneath the watchful gaze of towering oaks. The whispers shifted. What once had been tales of curses and blood-soaked shadows became something else entirely. They spoke now of the ghost of Alder Hollow. A great grey wolf, they said, larger than any beast should be, eyes glowing like lanterns in the dark. Not a predator, but a sentinel, a guardian, a silent protector that watched the edges of their village and kept the night at bay. The old women told stories by fireside. "I saw him once," one would whisper, eyes misty. "At the edge of the orchard. He looked at me, those golden eyes, and I swear he nodded, as if to say, 'Go home, you are safe.'" Children dreamed of the great wolf and drew his image in the dirt with sticks, always with a moon above him, always facing outward, guarding them from what lurked in the shadows beyond. Years passed like autumn leaves on the wind. Gareth's human body grew old. His hands, once strong and calloused from ironwork, trembled with age. His hair silvered, his back stooped. The forge that had once roared with fire and life grew cold and silent. But the wolf did not age. On nights when the moon hung heavy and full in the sky, villagers still heard it. A long, mournful howl drifting down from the forested hills. Not a cry of hunger, not a curse, but a song of vigilance, a promise. I am watching. Long after Gareth Whitlock's name faded into weathered gravestones and forgotten parish records, the legend remained. Some claimed they still caught glimpses of him. A flash of silver fur beneath ancient branches, eyes that glimmered like fireflies between the roots. And on certain nights, beneath a silver moon, the great wolf's voice rose and carried across the valley, fierce, eternal, and steadfast. But the story did not end, because guardianship has no end, because in every dark forest, in every shadowed hollow, there are always whispers, and somewhere, just beyond the edge of human sight, golden eyes still watch. One bitter winter, when the wind howled down from the mountains like a hungry spirit, and frost clung to every branch in crystal teeth, a stranger came to Alder Hollow. He arrived on horseback, his coat a deep midnight velvet, trimmed in silver thread that caught the pale light like frozen spider silk. His boots shone black as onyx, spurs gleaming. At his hip hung a sword of polished silver, etched with runes that glimmered faintly, even in shadow. He called himself Alaric, and he spoke with the cold confidence of a man who had never tasted fear. "I hunt beasts," he said in the tavern, his voice smooth and disdainful, as if the villagers' warnings were no more than old wives' fables. The villagers exchanged uneasy glances, tankards trembling in their hands. "You'd do well to leave the woods be," old Marnie murmured, her voice trembling with age and memory. "The ghost keeps us safe." But the stranger only laughed, the sound sharp and hollow. "Ghosts," he scoffed, "are nothing but stories waiting to be ended." That night, beneath a clouded and heavy moon, Gareth felt it. A presence in the woods. It was not like the shadows of bandits or the whispers of old forest spirits. This was colder, sharper, the scent of polished steel and burning oil, the tension of an arrow drawn tight, the stillness of a hunter poised for the kill. He did not run. The clash came swift and brutal. Steel rang against claw, sparks hissing in the snow. The stranger was skilled, more skilled than any Gareth had faced. His sword bit deep into fur and flesh, and the wolf bled black droplets into the frozen ground. Pain seared through him, but he fought on, jaws snapping, breath steaming in great plumes. He struck, dodged, lunged, his body worn and old, but still burning with purpose. And then, a misstep. Gareth stumbled, pain blinding him. The sword was raised high, the final blow ready to fall. But the stranger faltered. He looked into those golden eyes, and something ancient stirred in his blood. "I know you," the hunter whispered, voice cracking as if from some forgotten memory. Gareth's form shuddered, fur giving way to skin, claws to calloused hands. The transformation was agony, bones grinding, muscles seizing, but he forced it. And there, in the moonlight-dappled snow, stood a man once more. Battered, grey, his body scarred and trembling, but his eyes steady and fierce. "You came to slay a monster," Gareth rasped, blood on his lips, his breath ragged and cold. "But monsters are made by men." The sword wavered, then fell to the snow with a soft, final thud. The young man, Alaric, dropped to his knees, tears shining in his eyes. I never knew. I didn't understand. You do now, Gareth whispered. For a long moment, they sat in silence, the wind whispering through bare branches, carrying the weight of years, of curses and choices. And then, slowly, Gareth placed a weathered hand on the young hunter's shoulder. Come, he said gently. The night is long, and the woods will always need watching. Together, beneath that ancient moon, they walked back toward the village. Man and wolf, blood and legacy, legend and truth. And in the distance, the forest sighed, knowing that guardians would remain, that some curses are not shackles, but choices. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us create more content like this.